What's up, Tea Cats? This is Dylan from Woo Mountain Tea, coming at you with chapter 1 of the Masterclass on tea, where we are laying out terms and definitions. As you're gonna see, the world of tea is so vast. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different varietals from different areas, different countries. Here and now, we're gonna lay out what does tea mean, and then get into some of the types and then some of the subtypes. Basically, with each chapter, I started off with a one-sentence summary of all of the content of the video, of the chapter. And that kind of gives you a heads up of what's coming and gives you a bit of a framework to think about as we step into this new territory. All right, so let me give you the one-sentence summary of chapter 1. The word tea describes two very different beverage types: herbal tea and Camellia sinensis based tea. The latter being true tea that includes 6 major types: green tea, black tea, oolong tea, white tea, yellow tea, and dark tea, which all encompass their own vast sets of subcategories. So that's the one-sentence summary. Next, we dissect the sentence, break down all of the details, and then catapult you out of this video with a crystal clear understanding of tea terminology and taxonomy of tea. 会把这个传统茶文化带回去美国，在那边推广一下。So as we step into this topic, I want you to keep a visual in mind. I want you to picture a tree. You know, if you've seen like an evolutionary tree or a family tree, it's kind of like that. We're using the tree metaphor to symbolize how tea has these different types and then branches off into different subtypes of those types. Let's start at the trunk of this tree. We're gonna call it the tree of tea. At the trunk of the tree of tea, we have the first major branch point, and there's 2 branches that separate right here at the trunk. On one side, you have Camellia sinensis based teas. Camellia sinensis is the scientific Latin word for the tea plant. It's one species of plant, and that is the basis for all of the teas that we are talking about in this chapter. That's the plant that I study, that I research, that I've dedicated my life to so far, and that is our area of focus. The other branch is what's called herbal teas, and that is simply when you have any non-Camellia sinensis plants. For herbal tea, you can really use any plant, right? Like out of my window here, I see a big, beautiful pine tree, right? If I went and plucked some needles off of that pine tree, dried them out, put them in hot water, I would have a pine needle herbal tea. So a couple herbal teas that you have probably heard of would be like chamomile, peppermint, ginseng, right? These are all different plants. They might have something interesting about their specific water extractions, but we won't be focusing on those herbal teas in this course. We can basically forget about herbal tea for the remainder of this masterclass. And basically, I'm almost never talking about herbal tea. I am focusing everything on this Camellia sinensis based tea. This Camellia sinensis based tea branch then further branches out and divides into these 6 major tea types. And this is super important to know. So if you're in the literature, if you're reading scientific research about true Camellia sinensis teas, you'll often encounter the 6 major processing types, or the 6 major tea types. These 6 major tea types, a couple of them you've almost definitely heard of. These 6 major tea types include green tea, black tea, oolong tea, white tea, yellow tea, and dark tea. And it's only after you pluck the leaf, the tea leaf, off of the tea plant that you then process that raw green tea leaf differently to produce one of the 6 major tea types. As we push further along with this video, we're gonna get into some of the subtypes of each of those 6 major tea types, because each one of these 6 types has its own vast, enormous network of branches and sub-branches and subtypes within them. Let's move down that branch of green tea. We're gonna get into processing really deep and in detail in chapter 3, so I'm not gonna dive too deep into it right now, but basically the first step you do with green tea right up front is you gotta heat the tea leaves up. And that's actually what preserves the green color and the green characteristics of taste, aroma, and color. And there's different ways that you can create heat and apply that heat to the leaves. The 2 primary ways are by steaming the leaves. That's a steamed green tea. And then the other way is pan-fired green tea. Steaming is way more popular in Japan. Almost all the Japanese green teas are steamed. Pan-firing is much more common in China. So most of the Chinese green teas are pan-fired, but you do have some steamed Chinese green teas as well. But this is a crucial distinction because fixing, that's this first step of applying heat, is called fixing. The different fixing process that you use to the leaves are gonna drastically affect how the tea looks, tastes, and smells. It's gonna drastically affect all of those quality characteristics. So for example, the steamed green teas, they are way more vegetal, grassy, and green in general. That style of fixing really preserves the green attributes in the green tea. The pan-firing method of fixing, that really creates different aroma characteristics. So with pan-firing, you get much more of a toasty, nutty, roasting chestnut aroma with those. Just for the hell of it, we're gonna run through one green tea type from trunk to tip of the branch. So let's run with pan-fired green tea. All right, so now we're leaving steamed green tea aside and we're going the pan-fired green tea route. At this point, the pan-fired green teas will fork like 5 different ways about. And again, the different branches reflect different styles of processing. And these different styles of processing mostly have to do with the shaping of the green tea. Among these 5 different shapes, you have more of a slender shape. You have a flat blade-like shape. You have a needle shape, a pearl, kind of a rounded ball shape. A 5th and less common one is kind of like a corkscrew shape. Okay, so let's keep going. We're gonna pick the flat blade-like shape of green tea and we're gonna leave the other 4 shapes behind. This branch now forks 3 different ways: dragon well, da fang, and we have qiqiang. They're all flat blade-shaped pan-fired green teas. At this layer, we're getting to not just the processing, but we're also starting to incorporate elements of region. But let's just keep pushing forward. So let's pick dragon well. That's by far the most famous of those 3. And in fact, dragon well is kind of known as the king of green teas in China. So within dragon well, blade-shaped, pan-fired green tea, then you have 3 separate locations mostly. There are differences in processing style still, but the difference here is mostly location-based, right? So Westlake is kind of the core, the heart, the epicenter of dragon well processing and creation. Then a little bit further out, you have Qiantang, and then Yuezhou is a little bit, just means further out than the Westlake area. So now we have Westlake, dragon well, flat, pan-fired green tea. We're gonna keep running down the branch here. And so for Westlake dragon well, you have maybe 5 or 6 different cultivars that are commonly used to make Westlake dragon well. So among commonly used cultivars that are used to make Westlake dragon well tea, you got Longjing 43, Pingyang Tezao, Wuniu Zao, Zhenong 139 and 117. Zhenong just is the Zhejiang Agricultural University that's right in Hangzhou, right next to Westlake. A lot of times it's these ag schools that go and do the research and development to create these new cultivars. So those 2 are cultivars bred and created by that university. And then lastly, we have what's called Chunti Zhong, which is just like the native cultivars. It's like tea plants grown from seed, essentially. So these aren't ones that were propagated through cloning, but they're just kind of your old-fashioned, when a mother tea plant and a father tea plant love each other very, very much, they cross-pollinate with one another and they create tea seeds that are special mixes of both of the parent genetics. You have a bunch of tea plants that are entirely unique and then grown from seed that are also native to the Westlake area, and those are used to make dragon well too. So let's go with Pingyang Tezao. Now further after that cultivar, you can further differentiate based on what season, what time of year was the tea plucked. And this is where tea really varies from something like wine in terms of wine taxonomy, because wine you just harvest once per year in the fall. But for tea, we harvest, it depends on the region, the climate of that area, and a few other factors, but you can harvest 4 or 5 times for a Westlake Dragon Well. For these Westlake Dragon Wells of the Pingyang Tezao variety, Tezao, by the way, Tezao means especially early. So it's an early budding cultivar that's used to make Dragon Well. So that means it's gonna sprout a little bit early. So we're looking at like early April or late March. And so that's called first flush tea, that first growth of the tea plant of the spring, because tea plants are dormant in the winter, but then they wake up when springtime comes and they have that first initial outgrowth of new buds and leaves. So that is the first flush tea, and it's the most flavorful and the most coveted, highly priced, highly praised, delicious high-grade tea that you can get. You have that first flush tea. First flush is usually before April 5th. That's called pre-Qing. Now, second flush is before about April 21st. That's called pre-rain. And then the third one might be like a late spring, early summer harvest. Then you have a summer harvest. Then you have a fall harvest. The later you go in the year, the more the price drops and more the general quality of that tea type drops. Okay, so we're on to, we have one more layer to this branch. So beyond that, then you have the plucking style. So what part of the tea plant are you plucking? So if you just pluck the top bud, basically, and maybe one tiny first leaf off of the bud, that's special grade. So that's the top of the top, that's the best of the best. Then if you pluck a little bit more leaf, maybe one bud plus one full leaf, that's first grade. One bud and 2 leaves, that's like second grade. And then one bud, you go further down the stalk here on the tea plant, then you have 4th grade, and then usually they don't go higher than 5th grade for a Westlake Dragon Well. Okay, so now we're at the tip of the branch. There's no more ways to differentiate after this, but I mean, look at how far we've strayed from the trunk of the tree of tea here. Imagine you have a first grade Pingyang Tezao Westlake Dragon Well, which is a flat blade pan-fired green tea. That's 8 levels. So that 8 layered tea name that I just mentioned would be distinct and have a different price and quality than say a second grade summer harvest Longjing 43 Westlake Dragon Well, yada, yada, yada. So if you differentiate on any of the branches of this multi-layered tree, then you have different taste, different aroma, different color, ultimately different price, different demand, etc. Okay, so I hate to have done that to you, and I do apologize, but I wanted to run you through that movement from the base of the tree all the way down to the tip of the branch to show you just how many layers there are and just how complex this universe of loose leaf tea really gets. Moving forward here on out, I'm gonna stay within like the first or second branch points of each major tea type. We're gonna give you an overview of the most notable parts of that tea type, a couple of the big important subtypes, and then I'll name a couple of the specific varietals from each tea type that I personally love and recommend that you go out and find. Okay, so let's reel it back with green tea. So most of the green teas that I love are Chinese pan-fired green teas. So that includes, let's see, I love Duyun Maojian, Xingyang Maojian, Huangshan Maofeng, Taiping Houkui, Liu An Gua Pian, obviously Dragon Well, that's the king of green teas. Biluo Chun is unbelievable. Anji Bai Cha is fantastic too. Those are all Chinese green teas. On the Japanese side of things, I love me a good early flush Sencha. Gyokuro is phenomenal. If you can get the good stuff, it's extremely pricey, but if you want to pony up the bucks and get a good Gyokuro, you will not regret it. Matcha, obviously, matcha's great. And then, you know, matcha has its own entire sub-universe within it too, right? You have all these different grades and plucks and cultivars that are used to make matcha, and those all have different flavor attributes, different aroma, taste, color, etc. So you can see in any of those green teas that I just named, you can go all the way down to the very tip of the branch, in the same way that we just did with Dragon Well green tea. That kind of maps out a few of the good green teas, gives you a general sense of how things split up. Before we get bogged down too much in green tea, I want to move on. Let's go to our next tea type. Let's go with Oolong tea. The first branch point in the Oolong world is a branch that goes 4 different ways based on location. So there's 4 main Oolong producing areas. You have Taiwan, you have northern Fujian, southern Fujian, and you have eastern Guangdong. So basically all of the Oolong tea in the world comes from those 4 areas. And they all have their own, again, whole universes below them. Take northern Fujian, for example. This might actually have the most amount of subtypes. I've been in China and I've seen someone who specializes in northern Fujian oolongs, and I saw this like sampler pack they were selling of Wui Rock oolongs, and it was a briefcase, and you lift it up and there's like 40 different types of Wui Rock teas inside that type. Part of the reason for that is that, as you can hear in the name, that word rock, that kind of reflects the rocky mountainous region of northern Fujian. And so over time, in each of these valleys in between the mountains, you'll have the evolution of new breeds and new cultivars of tea and new styles of processing. And the people in those little valleys will become accustomed to that specific valley's tea, and they'll begin to like it. And it's through this kind of mountainous topography that all these different types and subtypes evolved. So if you find yourself buying Wui Rock teas, you could look for a Da Hong Pao, which is a big red robe. You got Rogui, which is fantastic as well. Those are the big ones from northern Fujian. Taiwan is distinctive because of its mountains. It's a very mountainous region, and different mountains have their own specific types of oolongs. So you have Li Mountain, Ali Mountain, but the general style of Taiwan oolong is characterized and embodied in the Dongding oolong tea. So all of those 3 that I just named are fantastic. Also Baozhong is a little bit atypical from the standard Taiwan oolong tea, but still definitely worth trying. Southern Fujian, the most famous is Iron Goddess of Mercy, aka Tieguanyin. So that's a small kind of kernel-shaped, very lightly oxidized oolong tea. That would be worth getting. If you do buy Tieguanyin, buy organic. There have been some issues with pesticide use in that area in the past, so make sure your Tieguanyin is organic. Last but not least of the oolongs, we have my home province of Guangdong, right? That's where I've been living the last 5+ years. And our eastern region of Guangdong, we produce what's called dancong. That's the type of oolong tea produced in eastern Guangdong. So dancong oolong, the most famous one as of recent years is the duck shit. Dancong, that one's fantastic, like crazy umami, savory, herbaceous as well. I love that tea. And then there's a bunch of different types of dancong oolongs as well. You know, that one breaks off into a ton of different cultivars and genotypes, just like the Wui Rock tea does. So that's a pretty good overview of oolong tea. Now let's walk our way back up the branch. Let's move over to black tea. Okay, so now we're in the black tea territory. The main distinction, the main fork in black tea right up front is CTC black tea versus whole leaf black tea. The thing you gotta understand about black tea is that it probably represents about 75, 80%, call it 70% of total global tea production. Vast majority of all the tea produced in the world is black tea. And the reason is that this tea is used when you're making like those ready to drink teas, like, you know, if you get Arizona iced tea at the gas station, that's black tea. Or like boba, that's all black tea, because it's a bit sweeter and more mellow than the other tea types. Black tea that's used for those industrial products is called CTC black tea, crush, tear, curl. Basically during processing, you're just obliterating the leaves, crushing, tearing, curling it up, and that kind of homogenizes the entire fermentation process of black tea. Again, wait till chapter 3 to learn more about the fermentation, but generally CTC teas are very low grade and not really what we're focused on in this masterclass. So let's leave that CTC branch of black tea aside and focus on the whole leaf black teas. Black tea is cool because there's all these countries all around the world that produce black tea. The Darjeeling region of India, up in the northeast in the foothills of the Himalayas, they make fantastic black tea there. Sri Lanka, Ceylon black tea is good. Even Kenya, even and Uganda, some of these Eastern African countries, they originally were only producing CTC black tea, but in recent years they've kind of stepped up their game and they've started making some really nice whole leaf, kind of more artisanal level black teas. So keep an eye out for them. Now let's go one layer down the branch here. You have small leaf and you have large leaf. So within Camellia sinensis, within this species, we have two main sub-varieties. We have Camellia sinensis, that's the small leaf type, and Camellia sinensis assamica, that's the larger leaf type. The asamicas grow closer to the equator, where it's hot and humid, right? So that's the ones that are growing in Sri Lanka, Kenya, India, and southern China, in Yunnan province, and then in Guangdong, we also grow large leaf. We grow both, where Guangdong is kind of a hybrid area. But these small leaf varietals, the sinensis tea plants, they're grown in northern and eastern China and Korea and Japan. They're much hardier in cold weather. They can resist a good thorough frost. So when you use large leaf teas to make black tea, the flavor profile is totally different than when you're using smaller leaf varieties to make black teas. The primary difference is that with these larger leaf black teas, you got like a much bolder, richer punch in the mouth. Malty is a really common characteristic for these large leaf black teas. Just a ton of really robust, sweet flavor. Smaller leaf black teas are a bit more floral, a bit more fruity, a bit more delicate on the palate. They're not quite gonna smack you in the mouth like a large leaf black tea would, but you get these kind of interesting, more like stone fruit, apricot, peach notes, or you might get more of a rose or floral note with these smaller leaf black teas. Both are good. I personally love, my favorite black tea is Yunnan large leaf black tea. That's my favorite. They do it really good there, but I drink small leaf black teas too, and I drink black teas from other countries as well. But all right, let's give you a couple black teas to keep an eye out for if you're black tea shopping out in the world today. Like I said, if you find a good Kenyan tea, they make black teas out of these unique cultivars that have purple tea leaves. So a purple leaf black tea from Kenya could be good. High altitude Sri Lankan Ceylon black teas are great. Darjeeling black teas from India, fantastic. Yunnan black teas are awesome. Now let's push up north. Actually in Guangdong, in western Guangdong, which is the part closest to Yunnan of Guangdong, we have a place called Yingde, which creates really good large leaf black teas. It's kind of a copycat of Yunnan black teas. So if you're gonna get the large leaf black teas from China, just get the Yunnan black teas. I'm not supposed to say that because that's my home province. But I don't know, try it. Diversity is good, and Yingde black tea can be done, is really good if it's done well. So those are the large leaves. Up, pushing north and east in China. The most famous one, the emperor of these small leaf black teas, would be Jinjunmei. Another really good one that just came out like in recent years. And this one comes from Hangzhou, like right in the same territory that dragon well is coming from that we were talking about before. Basically, they realized that people like black tea and they don't need to use 100% of their first flush tea crop for green tea production. They can save a certain subset and make really good black tea too. And so black tea made from that special grade first flush dragon well region is called Jiuqu Hongmei. So that's just another really high-end black tea from that area, small leaf as well. So we also have Keeman, right? That's the most famous one. That's a pretty good one. There's huge variability in quality with that one. Just try to get yourself a really high-grade Keeman if you can. Last but not least, we have a Lapsang Souchong. That's like a smoked black tea. Just like Keeman, huge variability in grade and quality with that. And the thing with that is that it's smoked. Some people like to smoke, some people don't. Try to get one that's not like crazy over the top smoky, or do if that's your thing. If you like the smell of a campfire, get yourself a super smoky Lapsang, but those are probably the notable ones. Let's teeter on back down into the 6 major tea types out of black tea territory, and let's get now into white tea. This could be my favorite tea type. Hard to say. I change my favorite tea type like every month or two. But white tea is really cool. The processing of white tea is very unique, so tune into chapter 3 to get more about that. But the first distinction The first branch point with white tea when you get on the white tea branch is between Yunnan white tea and Fujian white tea. Fujian is more east and north. That's going to be more small leaf cultivars, or at the most a hybrid cultivar, right? These sinensis and Assamica varieties can hybridize with each other and make these hybrid cultivars. So Fujian is different than Yunnan white tea. Yunnan white tea is all this large leaf tea material. And basically so let's take it one level lower with white tea. There's 4 main distinctions with white tea. You have silver needles, you have bai mudan, you have gongmei, and then you have shoumei. So those are 4 qualities, 4 grades of white tea, and they reflect the plucking style. So the first one, Bai Hao Yin Zhen, that's the silver needles. You're just plucking the bud of the tea plant and nothing else. So this is like the champagne of teas, extremely refined, extremely delicate flavor. I can't speak highly enough of silver needles. I drink them all the time. It's one of my personal favorites. The next one down is Bai Mudan plucking style, which is 1 bud and 2 leaves. Gongmei is more like 1 bud and 3 to 4 leaves. And then shoumei is like, you'll be lucky to find a bud within the pile of leaves that you're kind of sifting through. This probably rings a bell. You'll remember when we were talking about Dragon Well, right? We have the different grades. We have special grade, first grade, second grade, which is based on plucking style. Same thing here with white tea. So a couple really awesome white teas to not miss would be the Bai Mudan plucking style of Yunnan white tea. And that's called moonlight white tea. So it's called that because as these large leaf cultivars go through white tea processing, which is a long, long withering step, the hairs of the white tea become silver or white, and the leaves kind of become like a dark gray or almost like blackish. And that white on black effect of the appearance gives the name moonlight. Try to find yourself some moonlight white tea. That's one of my absolute most favorite teas. It's nice to drink those silver needles, but it's much more light and delicate on the palate. Whereas this moonlight white tea, when you have the leaves attached to the buds, it brings so much more punch to the flavor profile. So the Bai Mudan style pluck has way more of like the sappy, rich, sugary, sweet, thick body to the tea, whereas the silver needles are much lighter, crisper, more refined. Both are good, just different. So let's pop over to Fujian for a second with their white tea. They have 2 main white tea producing regions. In Fujian, you have Fuding and you have Zhenghe. The Fuding is gonna be a bit more vegetal, green, crisp, light, right? And the Zhenghe is gonna be a bit more fruity, sappy, sweet, sugary. They're gonna look a lot more similar than either one of those does to Yunnan white tea, because these are just like neighboring counties in Fujian, essentially. But all of those white teas I just mentioned are really worth trying. Again, I love white tea. And one of the things about white tea that's so cool is that it ages like fine wine. You can buy a white tea. They usually come in these cakes, and you take these cakes and you put it aside in storage. And over time, the flavor profile of the tea itself just transforms and changes and gets really unique new notes in it that wasn't there in the fresh young tea. So there's actually a really famous phrase in Chinese to describe this aging of white tea. It's 一年茶3年药7年饱. So that means in year 1 it's tea, in year 3 it's medicine, in year 7 it is a treasure. So that kind of speaks to 2 things. The compounds are evolving and changing over time, and traditional wisdom says that those newly formed age-induced compounds have more medicinal properties than the fresh tea, right? That's why they say at 3 years it's medicine, and then at 7 years it's treasure, because there's so many new rich aroma and taste characteristics that have evolved in that time that it is a treasure, and you should treasure it, cherish it, and drink it on special occasions and enjoy it. So find yourself some aged white tea if you can. Let's tiptoe back out of white tea territory, and I think that aging conversation, that aging topic, is actually a good segue into dark tea. Dark tea is also, like white tea, aged. So the most famous dark tea that you have probably heard of is Pu'erh, right? And dark tea is mostly produced in China, and the different provinces of China kind of evolved their own dark tea styles over time. Pu'erh is the dark tea from Yunnan province, and that differentiates into raw pu'erh and ripe pu'erh based on processing style that we will, again, dive all the way into in chapter 3. But these other provinces in China have their own styles of dark tea, which are much lesser known, but really interesting as well. My favorite non-pu'erh dark tea would be liubao tea. That's just such a unique, very, very unique aroma and taste characteristics with that. Very hard to find though. These lesser known dark teas are very hard to find. But a couple other famous dark teas from China would be in Hunan province. You have Fuzhuang cha and Qianliang cha. Those are really interesting, unique dark teas. In Hubei, you have Qingzhuan cha. And then in Tibet, you have Zhang cha, which is kind of the local Tibetan-made dark tea type. A lot of the tea used for these dark teas are from, we brought this up in Dragon Well conversation, it's the Chunti Zhong. It's those local seed-grown, seed-propagated tea cultivars, which are gonna be, like I said, each tea plant is completely unique genetically from the one standing next to it. So you can imagine if each dark tea production area has their own unique seed-grown tea, then the flavor profile of one region is gonna be vastly different than the next. And then on top of that, a big part of dark tea processing is aging. So a lot of times after these dark teas have been processed, they'll be pressed into bricks and then they'll be set aside to age for a while. And so the aging and the storage conditions of one place, right? The climate and the microbes in the air, right? All these things are different from one microclimate to the next. So that will greatly affect how the teas then transform through aging. That's kind of also why the tea type in general is so kind of mysterious and special, is because all these factors that play into the creation of dark tea are also unique from one place to the next. It's almost hard or impossible to replicate the process as you move from one location to the next. So dark tea, very cool tea type, time tested, age old. Get yourself some dark tea. I already named a couple of the big ones. If you haven't tried pu'erh, gotta get yourself some pu'erh, liubao tea. And then those other ones are really hard to find, but I don't know, do your best. Let me know if you find them. Okay, last but not least, right? We're backing out of dark tea territory and we're scooting over to the last tea type on the branch of Camellia sinensis type teas, our true teas, which is yellow tea. All right, so yellow tea is this weird little tea type. It's kind of like the black sheep of the 6 major tea types. It is hardly produced at all, and almost nobody really drinks it. Like the quantity of yellow tea produced annually is like 10% of the next most tea type above it. I don't know who decided to make it a major tea type or what qualifications it met in order to get in the group with the cool guys at the table, which are the greens and the blacks and the oolongs. But anyway, it's a major tea type technically, so let's talk about it. You could think of it like a yellowed out version of green tea. It's somewhere in between green tea and dark tea, right? So that aging, weathering process that forms dark tea, notch that back a little bit. Just don't turn it all the way brown, but keep it like in that yellow, just aged a bit after green tea territory. That's what yellow tea is. It's basically green tea characteristics, but a bit more mellowed and yellowed out. Yellow tea differentiates the same way that white tea does based on plucking style. So you have 3 main ones. You have Huangya cha, you have Huangxiao cha, and you have Huangda cha. So Huangya cha is just the buds. Huangxiao cha is usually buds plus 1 to 2 leaves. Huangda cha is like mostly leaf, like the shomei of yellow tea. So if you encounter any yellow teas at all, give them a try. I mean, it's so rare to find these things, but let's see, the most famous one would be Mengding Huangya. But also in China, you'll see Mogan Huangya, Weishan Maojian, Junshan Yinzhen, Beigang Maojian, Yuan'an Luyuan Cha, Pingyang Huangtang, and let's see, you got Guangdong Da Yeqing. All right, so those are like 6 yellow tea types that you likely will never ever see or encounter. But I kind of just wanted to throw a couple at you just to show you, even with the black sheep of the tea types, there's still subtypes and sub-subtypes, right? It's nuts. It's wild. But this is the world of tea. This is what you've gotten yourself into. I am happy that now we have kind of gotten this mapping, this taxonomy part out of the way. It was long and an arduous, sometimes tedious chapter, but it was entirely necessary. And now we are ready to get to the really fun stuff. In chapter 2, we are doing tea plant biology and cultivation, which is so cool. This is my favorite topic. The biology of the tea plant is insanely unique and special. The tea plant produces compounds and concentrations that you see in 0 other plants in the plant kingdom. And these compounds have such unique properties. They taste unique. They do unique things to our bodies. And then beyond that, the way that we cultivate these tea plants, the way that we work with these tea plants through agronomy in the field changes the levels of these various compounds, changes the flavor profile of the tea. There's so much to unpack with biology and cultivation of tea. I can't wait to get into it with you. So you have to come back for chapter 2. That's it for chapter 1. We went through the whole from the trunk all the way to the very tippy branch of the tree of tea. We differentiated herbal from Camellia sinensis. We left herbal in the dust. We went into the 6 major tea types, explored a lot of the subtypes and regions and history behind the subtypes of those subtypes. We did it all today. We did it all. So if you had fun with this video, if you did learn something, throw me a like. Smash the like button. Maybe also smash the subscribe button. It's right next to the like button. If you're smashing one, you might as well smash the other. Until the next video, I ask you to stay healthy, stay positive, and keep sipping tea. One love.